Mary Beth.
Oh, I didn't hear you now.
So I gotta tell this little story. I was at the hairdresser's the other day, and my hairdresser has moved to a suite. So it's just her and another person in this little room. And the other person, the other stylist, had a client who was doing this thing. I had to Google it. I Googled it, I'm like, why do young people talk so odd? I was sitting there in my chair, and it's a thing. The first thing that came up was something called vocal fry. Have you heard of that?
No.
So it's this way of talking in the lowest register possible in your voice, and then dragging everything out like this. Yeah, 45 minutes of that. I was like, wow. No one's heard of it, right?
No.
Yeah, it's a thing. Yeah. What?
What's the granddaughter?
I think it must be like a, I don't know, like maybe, I don't really know the point, actually. I honestly couldn't figure it out. I'm like, it didn't, you know, Kim Kardashian, you know, that way of talking, and like, oh my gosh. Yeah. So I'm going to talk normal as best as I can today with this microphone. But anyway, thanks for being here. The first thing I'd like to do is start with a prayer from the book. Dear God, I wish everything about relationships were easier, so I would always know what to do or say when someone needs comfort. No challenges, no problems, but I know better. Thank you for being with me, for being with us, God, in real life, and for helping us to grow. In your name we pray. Amen. So just a little introduction to this book. It's in our library, and it's in the resource section of the Stephen Ministry part of the library on the shelves to the left when you walk in. It's called Don't Sing Songs to a Heavy Heart, How to Relate to Those Who Are Suffering. And I think those of us in Stephen Ministry have found it to be an invaluable resource in our Stephen Ministry relationships, as well as in real life. I will pick this book up every time before I'm about to talk with someone who is going through a difficult time or has lost someone, has received a horrible diagnosis. I will go in here and make sure that I'm lined up with the best possible way that God can use me to be present and not to say something that I think is important. I think that's the main thing we'll talk about today is allowing God to be present with you. But I want to give you some background first. So Kenneth Hawk is the founder of Stephen Ministries, and he, along with his wife Joan, found Stephen Ministries in 1975. In the church that he was pastoring, he discovered that the needs of the people who were going through challenging times were much greater than he could meet. And he also knew very wisely that there are a ton of gifted lay people in the church who just needed training and support in order to provide care to people who are hurting. So they started the ministry in 1975. Joan, his wife, often humorously referred to Stephen Ministry as her third child. For the first 5 years, they headquartered the ministry in their basement and then in their living room. Joan was the first receptionist. She was also a customer service representative, and they tell stories of her having a telephone in one ear and a baby in the other arm, really passionate about this ministry. Fast forward to now, Stephen Ministry now has 13,000 congregations worldwide. It has really grown, but just to give you perspective on where it started, and it started from a passion, a God-inspired passion, and a determination to carry it forward. Joan served as Director of Administration for Stephen Ministries from 1978 until her death from ovarian cancer in 2002, and she was 55 years old at the time. Joan was in treatment for 3 years, during which time she and Ken were supported by family and friends, but they were also challenged with words that were anything but helpful and expectations that weren't always in line with what they needed or where they were at emotionally. So this book was written after Joan's death and is a reflection of personal experiences, stories, and just the fragile vulnerability of people who are suffering. The research team talked to over 4,200 people in the writing of this book. Some of the conversation was with caregivers. The majority was taking place with individuals who shared from the depths of their own personal pain and suffering. The book comes from the hearts of all these people, the organization of Stephen Ministry, and is dedicated to Joan Hawk. So it's just a really beautiful sentiment, and you feel it in every word here. There are more slides. So I have it on pause. Do I hit the center thing then, you think? Or play?
The play button should be. It's not.
Like the little light is clicking.
Oh, there.
So then I'm going to pause it again until I'm ready. Okay. So from Proverbs. Someone want to read that?
Like one who takes away a garment on a cold day, or like vinegar poured on soda, is one who sings songs to a heavy heart.
Heavy heart describes the feelings of a person who is disappointed or depressed, sorrowful or ill, experiencing some kind of trouble, misfortune, or distress. And there's that thought you have when you're going through this. Everyone thinks that I should be doing better than I am, right? Everyone thinks I should be improving. Everyone thinks I should be smiling, but I'm not. So what is wrong with me? How come I'm not as good as everyone else thinks I should be? Have you ever, I'm going to open it up to all of you, have you ever been in a situation like that? Where you're hurting and you're struggling and everyone has expected you to move on and they're actually kind of disappointed when they get the truth from you? And how did that make you feel?
I think it actually makes you feel worse
Mary Beth said it makes you feel worse.
because you're not accomplishing the goal that other people have set for you.
Makes you feel worse because you're not accomplishing the goal that you have for me. Yeah.
And I think it makes you feel misunderstood.
Yeah, misunderstood. Are you really hearing me? Yeah. And Chris?
It can drive me into aloneness.
Yeah. Yeah, Carl said it can drive you into aloneness,
It makes you feel weak,
and it makes you feel weak.
that you're a weak person.
Makes you feel like you're a burden.
Yeah, makes you feel like you're a burden. All things you don't want to feel when you're struggling. And important to remember here, all things that the person who's talking with you or trying to listen to you doesn't want you to feel. I mean, everyone means well. Everyone has good intentions. So this isn't an attack on anybody who's ever tried to listen to you or on you as a listener. This is just exposing us to some of the feelings that people have when they are going through a challenge and they feel like they're not being heard. As Christians, I think especially when we face a person with our well-intended cheerfulness, we're actually abandoning them to suffer alone, as you said. And like I just said, no one starts out their day hoping to add to someone else's pain, and everyone misses the mark at times. But in order for us to go a little bit deeper with this, we need to look at what are we thinking or feeling in these situations. So we're going to go to the next slide. Caregivers and care receivers in this book were asked to share what they perceived others' difficulties were in relating to them. And these are some of the most commonly listed responses. Things that we struggle with. Put yourself in the shoes now of the listener. Things that you might struggle with internally when you're face to face with someone else's pain. So in that discomfort with another person's pain, identifying too closely, like just getting sucked into it because it's something you've experienced and it brings it all back for you. And once that happens, once you're back into your own time and place with that situation, you're not present for them anymore. Feeling judgmental, well, that's not that big of a deal, like that. I don't get why they're talking about that or why that's bothering them. I've been through that. That's not that big of a deal. Understanding and empathizing with another's struggles. If it's something that you feel is unique, about 10 years ago when my husband was diagnosed with a chronic health condition at 48, I didn't feel like there was anyone who really understood me. Because whose husband has to leave work and go on disability at 48 years old? So there wasn't, people care, but there wasn't a lot of empathy, because who could get that? And accepting the anger of those who are suffering. Whoa, like you don't want someone to get mad, because then if they get mad, you're not doing your job as the listener, right? Like it must be our job to keep things calm, to keep things loving, to keep things happy. Are we comfortable with the anger that might come out? And so these are just a few of the top internal reactions, or the discomfort we might feel with another person's pain. Anybody else have a suggestion here or a thought? When you're face to face with it, what's uncomfortable for you? Yeah.
Sense of responsibility.
Mm-hmm. A sense of responsibility, like you gotta fix it.
How can I feel this?
Mm-hmm.
I also think you need to keep it to yourself, that you're there to listen,
Mm-hmm.
and all those thoughts and discomfort you have, you need to kind of quiet down
Mm-hmm.
and not show it.
So it's a challenge to keep like an emotional reaction or response to yourself, because you're feeling it, but is it helpful to show that? Yeah. So going on a little bit, there is kind of what you were saying. There's also the fix-it mentality, right? So if someone is sharing with you, your need or your desire is for the other person to get over it so they'll be normal again, and you can have the same friendship or relationship. You want to get back to what you're comfortable with or familiar with. The desire to hear only the positive, and minimizing the significance to the other person of the pain and suffering. When we do that, again, we're kind of shutting down the conversation. And they've got a little mantra here that says, fixing can be okay as long as it's dinner or the other person's car, right? That's something you can do, right? That is helpful and maybe needed. But trying to fix another person is not appropriate or attainable. And the rule of thumb is to fix things, right? But relate to people. So you don't want to come into the situation feeling like you have a plan or a goal or a desire to fix. And of course we want to. We want to take the hurt away, especially if you're a parent. It's awful, to just listen and be present when you know what the answer is. But it's not, that is not what we're trying to learn how to do here. All right. I suppose we didn't need the slides set for 20 seconds each, hey?
No, probably
Sue, I also think with this,
Go right ahead.
that it's not necessarily maybe that you want somebody to get over it, or you only want to feel the positive. It's that you really love that person and you want to be helpful to them. So that's some of where the fix-it comes from too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want to take this away for you, or somehow, because you want to feel like you're helpful, right?
Great point. Especially if you're a doer, right? There cannot be as much meaning in a being listening or listening present role as there is in the action of helping someone to get over something. So it's a hard place to be, I think, if you're a doer. And then there's our outward responses, and just touch on this a little bit. Helping another to open up. So you're standing there with someone and they have expressed this heartfelt concern. And here you are at a loss of what to say. So what should I say that isn't too intrusive? Do I ask these probing questions to learn more? Like, how do I know what to say? What's the right thing to say, or how much to inquire? And then there's the cliches, the platitudes, and the pat phrases that we are all familiar with, and we all have them in our repertoire. And I'm just wondering, what are some things that you may have heard? Or if you're really willing to be vulnerable, What are some things that you may have said that you're like, you walk away and go, oh my God, I can't believe I said that.
Grow up.
Grow up.
Yeah.
That's a doozy.
Take it as it comes.
Take it as it comes. So what, that doesn't seem so bad.
No?
No. I'd be okay with that, yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll remember that.
When I come to you with a problem, but if you say that, I'll be like, oh, that's helpful. But I do think that doesn't sound as bad as some things.
Now it's not as bad as others.
And there's no bad, I gotta say again though, there's no right or wrong, good or bad here. We're just trying to get more comfortable with what might be more helpful to someone during a difficult time, so.
Don't be a crybaby.
Don't be a crybaby, okay? And Marion had her hand up too, and then
It
Jill.
is what it is.
It is what it is. So what I love about that one is it stops the conversation, right? If I'm not done sharing, and then see, that was my mom's favorite. If I'm not done sharing and they say that, it's almost like a period, right? Well, that's the end of that, yeah.
I said to a cousin, well, at least you didn't have to go through the pain of childbirth. And then I later went through infertility myself and realized how hurtful that was.
Yeah. That would be trying to look on the bright side, right? Yeah. Well, there's a silver lining here, and this is what it is.
There was no bright side
Yeah.
right then.
Yeah. At that moment, no.
For her,
Yeah.
right.
My favorite is when God closes the door, He opens the window.
Yeah, when God closes a door, He opens a window. Yep.
Or God never gives us any more than we can handle.
Yeah, God never gives us any more than we can handle. Okay.
And I even think that out of the best intentions, people say, well, you know, God has a plan and we don't understand it yet, but we will someday. I think it's very hurtful to think that God's plan was to wound you.
Well, Petey shared that when people say God has a plan, and how hurtful that is, because if it was a bad thing, was it God's plan to hurt you, right? Yeah, that's a terrible place to be. So we're all guilty of the next one. Meaning well, again, too much talking, too little listening. I have all these solutions and suggestions and ideas for you. Stop what you're saying. I got this, right? And that's exactly what happens, right? Then you end up focusing on yourself and all your brilliant ideas rather than the hurting person. Boy, that happens a lot, doesn't it? Yeah. And how about giving advice or being too directive? That can happen too. Again, in a well-meaning effort to help someone, to solve the problem, to make it go away or at least more bearable. And these are just a few. I picked them out of the book. There's just so many more responses that came up. And remember that this isn't just one person's opinion. This came from over 4,000 hurting people. So we have all these things that we have to remember to say or not say, or how we should look, or how we should try to be present. But the most important thing we bring to this encounter with a hurting person is to remember that we are a guest. And I have that like in big bold letters in my notes. We are a guest in a holy place when we're face to face with someone who's hurting. We're not the manager. We're not the director. Really, we're not even the counselor normally. We're a guest. And important to remember in that space, number one, is that Jesus is already there. Jesus is there ahead of us in that person. Jesus is with us. And one of our Stephen ministers always likes to say there's 3 people in the room when he's with his care receiver. There's himself, there's his care receiver, and there's Jesus. So already in this holy place, Jesus is there. Always to remember that in that place, social conditioning and spiritual beliefs are present. So how someone dealt with situations growing up, what they learned in their family of origin or along the way, was anger dealt with, was sadness expressed, all those things are present, right, in that moment. So, or in that encounter. So you have to remember that. And then a question I wanted to ask all of you, spiritual beliefs are there, right? What are some spiritual beliefs that might enter the picture? Or what are some things that you've heard people say that reflect or that sound like where they're coming from spiritually? And remember, spiritual beliefs, well, you know, we don't talk about politics or religion, right? So spiritual beliefs are held pretty closely for people. So you're coming into a space where there are some maybe long-standing spiritual beliefs. Have you ever had that experience where someone has shared a spiritual belief with you that you're like, oh, I don't know if I agree with that, and how do I stay present?
Are you saved?
Are you saved? Yeah.
Whether it's considered a sin or not.
Yeah, whether it's a sin or not, do we really have to have that conversation? Yeah. Years ago, we were on a family vacation, and I think I've told this story before, but one of our friends died on the vacation in a boating accident. And he was on this ridiculous device called a kite tube, and pulled it behind the boat, and the thing rose up in the air like a big kite, and he's like sort of strapped to it or hanging on. And then the wind got underneath him and just slammed him into the water. And we're up in like Eagle River, so it took forever for an ambulance to get there. He ended up dying at the hospital. And on our way home, we talked with one of my husband's friends, just sharing the story. And the first words out of his mouth were, was he saved? Did he know the Lord? Was he saved? I'm like, I don't know. And it just made me realize what an odd question that was, because then it'd be like I knew what God was thinking at that moment, right? It's such a big picture that some people hold of their faith and their spirituality, and I think you got to come into these situations with that in mind. This could go anywhere, and just because I believe this doesn't mean that person has to, right?
Close to that is punishment, I'm being punished.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is punishment, or yeah,
Guilt.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Guilt.
Mm-hmm. Guilt. So all those things are present, whether you know it or not, whether you've ever talked about it or not with that person, it's part of the picture. Don't attempt to redo the person's way of handling the situation to suit yourself. Well, if you just get busy, why don't you join a club? You know, all those things, right? But do, and I'm sure everyone does this, do lovingly attempt to perceive the depths of the other person's suffering. Come as a guest to the suffering person's house of pain without assumptions or judgment. Come with an open heart. That's all you have to do, sort of. So I've just got one more before Pastor Ann will take over here. And I want to read something to you now, just a teeny little snippet, and have you sort of imagine this scenario and think about the idea of being present. Right? How can you be present for the person in this scenario? A friend's mother has just died at the age of 85. She had lived a full and vibrant life for 80 of those years, but in the last 5 has been declining steadily. Your friend has just told you the news. What do you say? Or how could you be present for this person? Imagine the scenario in your head for a second and think, okay, here I am face to face with this friend.
Own your own feelings?
So you can own your own feelings. Personally, you mean as the listener?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's okay to have the feelings. Yeah,
I'm feeling sad.
I can. I'm feeling sad for you. Yeah. Any other thoughts? There's no wrong answers. We already went through all that. No, that's not true. Ann's going to get even more.
Right away, I know what not to say,
Yeah.
which is, well, at least you had her for 80 years.
Yeah.
Or for
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Or she's gone to a better place.
Mm-hmm.
At least she's not suffering.
At least, yeah, all these things you want to kind of stay away from. Can you think of something you'd want to say that would be helpful? Or how would you be present?
Maybe just ask how they're working with it.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
How are you feeling about things, or how are you handling the grief? You know there's grief, or the feelings.
How are you today
How are you today? Well, I'm terrible.
in this moment?
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, in this moment, right? Yeah. You can just say you care.
Bring a hot dish.
Is that Petey?
What a Lutheran thing to do.
Okay. And here, we're not talking about words or suggestions, just your presence. So, just your presence is worth much, much more than words. The fact that you showed up, or that you called, or that you didn't turn away when you saw them coming, because you're like, oh, what am I going to say? So then you quick run down the other aisle of the grocery store. Because I've done that. Who, who hasn't, right? I'm just not in the right place for this right now. Communicates to the other that he or she is valued, precious, beloved. Just your presence. Not the card you send, not the meal you make, all those are all good things, but just your presence communicates this. And brings not only the gift of yourself into the relationship, but also in and through you the gift of God. Your presence is everything. When we go through Stephen Ministry training and there's like 40 to 50 hours of it, at the end everyone goes, well, I guess all we have to do is show up and listen. And it's like, yeah, that really, but it takes a lot to get comfortable with that. I'm really sorry for this delay. If I go back and try to fix it, it'll be a bigger delay. There you go. So here's some things you can do. When you want to be present to someone, you can follow their lead. Like, are they talking or not? Are they crying? Are they venting? Are they changing the subject? Follow their lead. Let them be the one in charge of where this is going to go. You can focus on them, and that's what we were just saying about presence. Look right in their eyes. I don't know if it's someone you really know. Do you want to hold a hand? Do you want to sit, make sure you're facing them? Maybe not be on your phone. Listen. Let them cry. Validate the feelings. And that's just, that must feel horrible. I'm so sorry you're feeling that way. Anybody in here have any Stephen ministers have suggestions on how to validate feelings? Something you've used that is helpful?
Thank you
Mm-hmm.
for sharing.
Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that means you want to know more, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's really important.
Mm-hmm. That's really important. There's value in what you're sharing. Something that Leah always says, tell me more, which I'm sure you use in your practice as a pediatrician. Tell me more, I'm really interested. You know, it helps. Listen again. Share the hurt, like Carl said. You can cry, you can be sad with them, and listen more. So just trying to make a point there that it really is all about listening and letting them know by all kinds of ways, your body language, what you're doing, saying or not saying, that you're really there to listen. And so here's a prayer that was in the book that I thought was kind of cute. And it's really good to think about. So, okay, first of all, oh Lord, please keep your arm around my shoulder so you're not going into this alone, right? You know, like I said, Jesus is there with you, absolutely wants to walk with you into this encounter. And then your hand over my mouth, because I don't know about you, but the number of times that I've walked away from a situation and said, oh, I can't believe I said that, far exceeds the times I walk away and think, oh, I should have said that. Like, because I was so quiet that I didn't say anything. That's not me. I'll like try to say something and try to fix it. I've learned a lot from this book about, I don't want to walk away anymore and say, oh, now I have to call and apologize. It's kind of old. So, Esther Ann is going to share the second half.
And this is on slideshow.
And there's a nice delay too for you to interact with the crowd or whatever.
Okay, we're going to talk about words that hurt, not heal. And I'm just going to go to the next one because we don't need to, be in this slide forever. Oh wait, yes we do, because this is what I want you to come up with. Shoot, I want to go back.
I don't know how to
Okay.
go back.
So here are some words that hurt, but I want to talk about why, right? Like, why would these words be hurtful? Because on the surface, it seems like maybe a nice thing to say. But what, in the research, I know how you feel was rated really poorly. I know just how you feel was rated worse than that. And the worst one was, I know exactly how you feel. Right? So just to say, I know how you feel, and then I know just how you feel, but worst, I know exactly how you feel. So even if you had a father who died in a car accident and you were talking to someone whose father died in a car accident, you still can't say, I know exactly how you feel. Because who knows what your relationship was like with your father, or what that person's relationship was like with their father, right? Like, so why do you think those words were counted as hurtful among these 4,200 suffering people? What's hurtful about that?
Takes the attention back to you.
Right, so it's, I know how you feel, and then you probably have to explain why you know exactly how they feel. So then it's back on you, or telling your story of why you know exactly how that person feels, right? So it totally takes the attention off the person you're supposed to be listening to. Why else could that be hurtful?
It invalidates how they're feeling.
Pardon me?
It invalidates how they're feeling.
It invalidates how they're feeling. Can you say more about that?
I mean, to say, well, I know how you feel, well, it's the same situation. It basically says that their feelings, the way they're feeling, just doesn't mean as much anymore.
Yeah, it's another period, right? I know how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to talk about that. I know just how you feel. Yeah.
Because you're assuming you know how someone else feels,
Yeah.
you know, which may be totally different than how you feel.
Right, because not only do you not know exactly how that person feels, you really can't claim that if you haven't asked how do you feel, right?
Yeah.
And I want to tell this story about my grandmother, Posey. My grandfather had dementia, and it was very stressful for her to like sit vigil with him, to for him to not know where he was or what was going on, to talk to the doctors all the time. Like, his care was very stressful for her. And when he died, I called her and I talked to her and I said, you know, I'm really sorry. And this also tells you something about my grandma, which I could tell lots of, I could sit in a lot of therapy sessions about, but I said, you know, how are you feeling? And I was ready for her to say something like, I'm sad, or we had been married for so long, or, you know, something that I assumed, right? And she said, oh my gosh, I'm so relieved. Right?
That's what I would think.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've ever been in that situation,
But if you
I'm
haven't.
sorry, that was my first thing I thought she would say.
Yeah. But so to come right out and say, I know exactly how you feel, would not have been helpful in that situation. I didn't know exactly how she felt for so many reasons, but also because her first reaction to that situation was relief. I'm so relieved. He was suffering, you know, and I was really, really stressed out. And now we're not in this in-between space anymore, right? It's done. I'm so relieved. Another reason that I know how you feel is hurtful is because it takes away the uniqueness of that person's story, right? So the example I was giving before about your father died in a car accident, my father died in a car accident, they're not the same person. And so you're kind of taking away the unique story of that person's dad and the relationship that they had together. and what he meant to the world and to his family and to your friend in particular, right? And those are things you would want to draw out of a person, that beautiful, unique story, instead of shutting it down by saying, I know how you feel. It makes a person's loss general instead of specific, and every loss is specific, right? It's for the best. Why are those words hurtful? And we know all different iterations of it's for the best, right? So let's think of a couple more it's for the bests. We said a couple already. What?
He's in a better place.
He's in a better place. What else?
It could have been worse.
It could have been worse. They're at peace now, right? Yeah, they're not suffering anymore, right? So why is that hurtful? Why might that be hurtful to someone?
Well, it ignores what they might be feeling,
Yeah, yeah.
or their feelings about the situation.
Mm-hmm.
It moves back into an I statement, what you think.
Yes, another I statement. So it comes right, I think it's for the best, right? I know they're in a better place. Comes right back to you. I think that this phrase can be helpful. It's usually helpful long after the event has happened, when someone can gain maybe some perspective or the loss isn't so immediate. So it's for the best might be something that I agree with when that person has come to that conclusion themselves, right? Like, I know now, 6 months later or whatever, that it really is for the best. And then I can say, yeah, I think you're right. Maybe it is for the best.
It's something you can validate, but not
Yes.
something you can say.
Right. So
Yeah,
you don't
yeah.
get to offer it, but you can validate it.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I do think that it is, it might make the person feel, the message, the subtext might be, you're selfish for feeling pain when this is really better for your loved one.
That's a really good insight. Petey was saying the subtext of it's for the best or this person's in a better place. The subtext is you shouldn't feel that way, or you're selfish for feeling that way because this situation is actually better now. Is that
You're selfish for feeling sad.
for sad? You're selfish for being sad because this is actually better this way. Yeah. Carl.
I'm kind of wondering, not to analyze you, but if you see Jesus and your grandma in her woundedness ministering to you and how you're feeling about your grandpa. I'm just curious.
Did I
It's so
in that
personal.
situation?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if that's, I think we as caregivers are very careful about being vulnerable ourselves, to focus on. And in a situation like that, I'm just wondering about the wounded healer, the known thing.
Yeah.
Many times people who are in terrible pain, be it guilt because I wasn't a good wife or whatever. I'm just asking, as a Stevens minister, how vulnerable can you be?
Well, that's a great question.
So here's a really good question. As a Stephen minister, how vulnerable can you be with the other person? Because there is this concept that comes from Henry Nouwen that we are all wounded healers, right? That none of us are perfect, that we're all walking around with our own pain, and that sometimes, in fact, that can help you be a healer, right? Having experienced your own hurt.
And that was your grandpa.
And that was, so my grandpa had died. I learned never to expect anything like compassion or sympathy for my grandma. So in that situation,
I didn't want to go there.
no. And I knew that wasn't what I was going to get from her. I had to get that from someone else. I think it is appropriate to be vulnerable because I think vulnerability invites more vulnerability, right? Like when you put yourself out there, you want to be met out there. You don't want to be alone out there in that vulnerable place. As a Stephen minister and as a pastor, and this comes from Nadia Bolz-Weber. She says you can preach from your scars, but you can't preach from your wounds.
Or your stars.
So as someone offering care or as a Stephen minister, I can be vulnerable and share my scars, the things that are healed, but not my wounds, the things that are still bleeding out, right, on me, right?
That's a good distinction.
Because then that person feels like they have to take care of me, right? Because I've been so vulnerable about something that's actually going on in the present moment that then the focus comes on me again for that person to take care of me. Yeah. But I could say something that happened in the past or something that feels, it's still vulnerable to share, but not bleeding out. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very much.
Let's see. How about keep a stiff upper lip, or what else kind of relates to that? Think of something else that could relate to that sentiment.
Be strong.
Be strong.
Please don't cry.
Don't cry.
Suck it up.
Suck it up. Yeah.
You have a strong faith.
Oh, yeah. Well, you have a strong faith. You can get through this. Right?
You have to be strong for.
Oh, you need to be strong for your children, or you need to be strong for your husband in this situation. Yeah. So those are all kind of variations on the same theme. So what is hurtful about saying, keep a stiff upper lip, be strong for other people? Why is that hurtful, or why could that be hurtful?
It really closes the door on vulnerability.
Yeah. I don't want to hear you be sad about this. Be strong.
Or that's been long enough. We just,
Oh,
we just
you've been doing this for long enough. I heard this story already.
Right.
Be strong now. Yeah. Yeah, read
It
it.
also adds to the pain.
Yes, it adds to the pain because you're adding an expectation for that person, right? You can't be sad anymore, right? Who has ever been in grief that has come back maybe years later and kind of punched you in the gut in a time when you weren't expecting it to? Has that ever happened to anyone? Where maybe it's years later, or you were super sure you were over that, but something happened, or you smelled a particular smell, or you heard a particular song, or you went into a particular place, and all of a sudden you were like, oh, I miss my mom. Or has that ever happened to you? Yeah. So saying something like, keep a stiff upper lip, be strong, suggests that there's a timeline for grief that makes sense, right? That makes linear, logical sense. That person died a year ago, so now you can be strong, right? That doesn't respect the fact that grief has no timeline, and that grief shows up in the strangest of places, and that grief can knock you off your feet when you're sure you're in a better place, right? What else? At least. Give me some at leasts.
It could have been worse.
It could have been worse.
You gotta say goodbye.
At least you got to say goodbye. Yeah.
A girlfriend said to my daughter at my husband's funeral, "It's gonna be okay." And that made her really angry. She thought, it's not gonna be okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't the time to say that.
Yeah, it's gonna be okay. Like at the funeral, right? Yeah. Yeah,
Maybe a year later, it would have
yes.
been okay.
A coworker of mine lost his first wife at the age of 33. She was the only girl he ever dated from high school, and she was really a good person. She was a foster mom and did all kinds of things. And he had a real strong faith, but he said to me, he said, "Why would God take her so soon?"
Yeah.
And I said, "I can't give you an answer." I said, "But maybe someday there will be an answer." Well, 25 years later, after the oldest son had served 7 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, someone that was in his automobile did, and the youngest son went to college and became an alcoholic. He beat that, and the oldest boy came back. His uncle gave him a job at his business, and they turned out fine. And before my friend passed away, about 2.5, 3, well, it was about 25 years, I said, "Remember you asked me a question?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "God saved her from having a broken heart, because that would have broken her heart to see her boys have that happen to them." I said, "He spared them." And he said, he said, "Don," he says, "that's a pretty good answer." And, and I thought it was. I thought because she was such a good person, God didn't want her to see that.
But that conversation, when her death was fresh, would not have been good.
I said to him, "I can't give you an answer, but maybe someday we'll understand."
And that's a really important thing to say. If someone is saying, like, why is God doing this to me?
Mm-hmm.
Why did this happen? It is totally okay to say, I don't know. You don't have to come up with like the appropriate theological answer to that question. You can say, I don't know why this is happening to you. I don't know why this particular event happened. Let's see. At least this didn't happen. We were doing some at leasts. At least you got to say goodbye. Or from the example earlier, at least she lived to be 80, And I have a friend, I'll tell that story in a little bit. Okay, so you shouldn't, fill in the blank. Tell me some you shoulds or you shouldn'ts.
Don't do anything for a year.
Don't do anything for a year. You should not move, make any big life decision, do anything for a year. What else?
Get out there.
You should get out there.
Yeah.
You should get that online profile going.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Okay. What else?
I always like if you're grieving and having feelings of regret or whatever in the context of a relationship, I always like, well, you shouldn't be so hard on yourself.
You shouldn't be so hard on
maybe
yourself.
Maybe I need to take a look at, to come to peace or to come to terms with things. And it's so dismissive.
Yeah.
To hear that.
You shouldn't be so hard on yourself.
You shouldn't feel that way.
You shouldn't feel that way. Woo! Okay, so here's the thing that's hard. The thing that you're saying you should or you shouldn't, you might be right. Right? Like, you should see a therapist. You should join a grief group. And you might be right. That doesn't mean it's helpful. That doesn't mean it's being present with that other person. So you can be right, and you just have to swallow that deep inside, right? Because it's not about being right. Yes.
This is some information that is so new to me, but I just read someone saying any unsolicited advice comes off as criticism.
Ooh, any unsolicited advice
Yeah.
comes off as criticism.
They have to be ready to hear it. I mean, it may be true, but
Yeah.
they have to be ready to hear that. Until then, it doesn't,
Right, it's not helpful,
it doesn't help.
right?
Well, and when they ask, then
Mhm.
it's not unsolicited.
Right.
You know?
But if it's, you should see a therapist,
Yeah.
that person might be receiving it as, why didn't you seek
Yeah.
out some help?
Yeah, I'm so screwed up.
Or, yeah.
I don't even know that I need help.
I'm so messed up, I need professional help, right? That's a good one to remember. Unsolicited advice sounds like criticism. Yeah, my grandma was good at that too. Unsolicited advice. Okay, it's God's will, and I think, and God doesn't give you any more than you can handle. We talked about these earlier, and this can be hurtful, especially if this isn't that person's theology, right? And this can be hurtful because why would it ever be God's will to hurt you?
Right.
Or to make you suffer the way that you're suffering? God doesn't give you any more than you can handle. Again, Nadia Bolz-Weber likes to say, God doesn't give you any more than your community can handle, right? So you're not doing this alone. God doesn't give you more than you can handle, you plural, not you singular, right? Because people get stuff all the time that's too much to handle, right? Who has ever been up to here, desperate, knowing that you couldn't handle it alone? Anybody? Yeah. So God won't give you more than you can handle. Is that helpful in that moment? No. Okay. So I wanted to, okay, go to the next slide, but we're getting real close because you all have such good things to say.
It just takes a second.
Yep. So pink thinking in this book is always thinking positive or always thinking on the bright side. And here are some examples of that. Cheering people up. Cheering another person up is often for you, right? Because you want that person to feel better. Glossing over something. You're young. You'll meet someone else. Denying that something's wrong. So all of these are examples of that, like, pink, cheery, everything's going to be okay, super positive thinking that really I'm not sure if I want to use the word denies, but subverts just being with that person in their grief or in their sadness. To be present to someone means to be present to what's going on with them. And if what's going on with them is sadness, then to be present means to be present to that sadness, not to make someone feel better, but to be with them in that hard place, which is a really hard place to be. And Stephen Ministry has taught me, I used to think, well, all I did was listen, or I just listened, right? Kind of minimizing that. And Stephen Ministry taught me that actually listening is really hard. And listening's a skill. And listening is a gift. And it's often the most important thing a person needs, right? So never never underestimate just listening. We as a culture minimize listening. We love action. We love doing things, making things better, being able to see progress, right? We don't have a lot of time for being with people in their sadness. And it's necessary, yes?
I was just going to say also in the listening piece, you talked about we need action. And part of that listening is sometimes just the quiet of listening.
Yeah.
Not filling the space.
Mm-hmm.
Just waiting. It's the waiting.
Yeah, so it's not just listening, it's allowing that person to say something and stop and not jump in with your own words, but to be in what can sometimes be a very uncomfortable silence, and to just be in that until they start talking again, right? Because they're processing, right? The talking out loud is processing. And if they stop, that's their brain trying to process more. So to kind of jump in.
Right. And sometimes that you jump in with this pink thinking.
Yes, yes. This is an easy way to jump into the conversation, right? Okay. Oh, we gotta go. So these are some simple and profound things that you can do for people who are suffering or in grief. A genuine prayer, right? So if you say you're going to pray for somebody, really pray for somebody, right? Don't just say, oh, I'll pray for you. Really do that. Really pray for them. Intercede for them on their behalf. And again, we could say this every slide, right? Show up. Show up, show up, show up. My brother is the master of this, and he'll say, I have no idea what to say, so I'm just going to come over, right? And he doesn't ask. He says, I'm going to come over, right? Name the elephant, right? When hurting people refer to the situations causing their suffering, they strongly desire to have their pain acknowledged. Right, so if they're saying something, acknowledge that big elephant in the room. So you get punched in the gut by grief, like we talked about before, and you say, oh, I miss my mom. And you say that to your friend. And then your friend says, grief lasts a long time, doesn't it? Or, yeah, your mom would have loved this place, right? To validate, to name the elephant in the room. Reminiscing, sometimes I feel like, well, I don't want to say that to that person because I don't want to make them sad, right? I'm not going to talk to them about their dead child because I don't want to make that person sad. Usually that's I don't want to be sad, or I don't want to be uncomfortable. People, I have found, and this book also found, like to reminisce about their loved ones. So to say, I noticed that it was so-and-so's birthday last week, or I remember so-and-so's, that your anniversary with your wife who died was this past week. And then they get to talk about their wife who died, right? And they get a chance to invoke her name, to share her memories, to keep her alive. Ask someone how they're doing, and then follow up. So you could say, how about I call you next week? I'm sorry, I'm distracted because I gotta go do church. So I I recommend this book to you, and I'm gonna hand this off to Sue to wrap up, because I'm gonna go do church. But thank you, and it's so good to hear you sharing, and it's so good to hear this. And I think it's important to share the times when people have hurt you with their words, right? Because often it's at really critical times, like at your husband's funeral, right? So to share, that was really hurtful to me, with this group of people is a brave thing to do, and it's a healing thing to do. So thank you for participating. Thanks, Ann.
Thank you.
Thank you.
She left me to do the blessing. Thank you, Pastor.
Yes.
Or questions?
Priesthood of all believers, man.
Any questions or anything else you'd like to add before we conclude?
No, it's just helpful.
Yeah, it's a great book. It's in the library. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I felt like part of the reason I wanted to come to this is find out ways to be more listening than so much talking. But I felt all the things we've talked about, I feel are so ingrained in me. I don't know if that's just how, society is brought up or what, that some of them, it's like, wow, you have to really be thinking and in tune with this other person to not do any of those things that, like you say, some of them you would think are not real hurtful, but can be very hurtful.
You should become a Stephen minister. Then you would learn.
Oh, and then you would still screw up daily, as we all do. So Jenny Clemby, who's not here today, always said, because we reflect on this stuff. We meet twice a month, and that's part of what we talk about is, I didn't listen well here or there, and then we support and give suggestions to each other. But she said, if you mess up one day, you're always going to have another chance. So this is a place where it is good not to be hard on yourself. And if you really want to explore listening, we've got other books in the library that talk specifically about how to be a good listener. And I think take one thing, change one thing about how you listen, and kind of practice it, like eating properly every day, right? It's just a habit. And then try another thing. But to take it all at once, it'd be overwhelming and not necessary.
I think too, as I've been thinking about this, what Pastor Ann had to say about sometimes you do these things because of how much you love somebody too, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we can go through this and say it's that you don't want to feel sad or that you want them to feel better so you can have this part of the relationship back or all of that. But sometimes, when I'm reflecting on the mistakes that I make, it's out of my best intention, I love you so much and I don't want you to feel this hurt or this guilt or whatever. And so it is having some grace for myself, yeah, these are things to be better at, but I'm certainly not doing them because I don't want to feel pain or because I, don't want to feel somebody else's hurt or because, it really is coming from a genuine place if I just don't know how to do better sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I find that it's hardest with my own children, because with your kids you kind of want to fix what the problem is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's got to be one of the hardest times to deal with hurt, is when it's somebody who's really close to you.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
when you're emotionally involved in somebody else's life, it's a lot harder to not want to fix things right away.
Plus, you know them well enough to know the answer.
Well, and coming from the daughter's perspective on that too, right? Some of the most hurtful things that have been said to me in my times of grief have been from my mom, right? And I think, but they've come from a place of her genuine love. I mean, one of the most terrible is my dad died by suicide, and when we were cleaning out his stuff, my mom was my parents were divorced, right? And so she said, I wish his house would have just burned down so that you wouldn't have to do this, right? That was super hurtful. But she said it because she loved me so much, and she saw how much that, was hurting me to have to go through all of his things in that aftermath, right? And so it was really not helpful. But it didn't come out of a place of ill intent of hers at all, right? It came out of a place of over-identifying and like such love and care for me.
You know, just to bring this back to Stephen Ministry, when I joined or felt the call to become a Stephen minister, I had no idea how much that I was doing that for a specific reason, but I had no idea how much this would affect my own personal life and my own personal relationships with every level of people that I encounter. It has been truly, truly a blessing for me in lots of ways that I never ever thought. And this book is amazing. It is really just amazing.
Thanks, Marion. And I want to say that too, thanks to our Stephen ministers who are here today and to those who aren't. And this is just a teeny, teeny snippet of the kinds of stuff we do. So you have to have a patience for listening and going deep every 2 weeks, because that's what we really do, is try to self-reflect so that we can be better listeners and better support to our congregation and to your friends and the community. So surely this is also a plug. If you know someone who is struggling or suffering, I think you get a little bit of a feeling for what a Stephen minister could do to help that person. And there's no problem too small or too great. You know, it's all relative.
I would also like to say, as a person who's had a Stephen minister, that one of the hardest things for me in doing that was the fact that I didn't think I deserved that help, that there were other people that were going through much more difficult things than me, and that thanks to Pastor Ann and Sue and Marion Hines, I began to realize that that wasn't the case, that, you know, everybody deserves to have help, no matter, and mine was situational, and I did get past that, but asking for that help, that was really a difficult thing, because again, of all those things we talked about, I really thought I should be able to solve all this stuff myself, and it made a huge difference for me, huge.
Thanks. Great story. We're reading a book on Wednesday nights called Rising Strong by Brene Brown, who's a sociologist, and that's one of her main quotes is, "We don't have to do it alone. We were never meant to." So ask for help if you need it. It's completely confidential. If you share your story, it's beautiful to hear, but you never have to. No one needs to know you have a Stephen minister. Your name will never be shared in the group. It's really not what we're concerned about, is people's names or their history or who the person is. It's way more about the quality of care that the Stephen ministers can provide and allowing God to direct our relationships. So thank you. I have a blessing from 1 Thessalonians. May God himself, the God of peace, sanctify you through and through. May your whole spirit, soul, and body be kept blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. And the one who calls you is faithful, and he will do it. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you.